At 0715, the air over Laughlin Air Force Base was already thick with sun and sweat. The scent of jet fuel clung to everything. Heat shimmered off the tarmac as rows of T-6 Texan II trainers gleamed under the early light, lined up like chrome promises, waiting to be kept. Inside the main hangar, boots thudded across concrete and voices echoed over the clatter of clipboards and flight bags. It was a rhythm of movement, tension just under the surface, like everyone was chasing something they couldn't quite touch. Ava Lewis didn't chase. She observed. She moved through the room with quiet steps, her brown hair pinned back clean, not a strand out of place. A plain green notebook was tucked under her arm. It went everywhere she did. That's how she got the nickname, Clipboard Chick. No one knew where it started, but it stuck fast. She never corrected it. The other cadets didn't dislike her. They just didn't notice her. Or if they did, it was with an easy smirk. She was the one who always sat in the back of the briefing room, taking notes while others cracked jokes. She didn't talk much during breaks. She stayed behind after classes to rewatch simulator tapes. She memorized checklists, procedures, emergency protocols, everything that didn't shine in the moment but mattered when things went sideways. People noticed that kind of focus, but not in the way that earned praise. Some cadets called her intense. Others said she overthought everything. There were whispers that she was only here because the standards had dipped, that she couldn't keep up in the air. So she compensated with theory. No one said it outright to her face, but she heard it anyway. You always do. In the way people leave you out of group chats or exchange glances just after you walk into a room, Ava kept her head down and her hands steady. She wasn't flashy in the cockpit. During formations, her lines were clean but never showy. During debriefs, she never defended herself. If an instructor pointed out a mistake, she nodded once, wrote it down, and moved on. Quiet competence. That's what she carried. Outside the dorms, after hours, some of the others joked around the vending machines or swapped stories about who blacked out pulling high Gs. Ava could sometimes be seen through the simroom window, alone, headset on, replaying emergency descent drills in the T-6 mock cockpit. From 2130 to 2300, that's 9:30, to 11 p.m., she would sit there, reviewing every line, her fingers moving over the same checklist again and again. She never tried to impress anyone. She didn't need to. What no one asked was why someone would work that hard when no one was watching, why someone so quiet always carried that same green notebook, or why, when the others were laughing over lunch, Ava sat off to the side, eyes fixed on the ramp, watching every T-6 take off like it meant something more. She wasn't just another flight student. Not really, but no one saw it yet. By 1045, the sun was high and brutal, and the air over the flight line at Laughlin shimmered like a sheet of glass. Inside the T-6 Texan II, the cockpit heat wrapped around Ava like a glove. Her hands stayed steady on the controls. Checklist already complete. Headset snug. Canopy sealed. It was just another training sortie. Nothing unusual. Nothing she hadn't studied 100 times before. Until the turn. They were running maneuverability drills out near Sector 4. Her flight partner for the day, a loud second-year cadet named Carson, had already made his opinions known, said flying wasn't just about checklists and theory, said real pilots flew with instinct, not bullet points. When Ava eased into a climbing turn, controlled and textbook precise, he scoffed into the mic. What are you doing? Flying a sightseeing tour. You can't even pull 2 Gs. She didn't answer. She just finished the maneuver and brought the aircraft smoothly back to heading. No dips. No corrections. Just the quiet hum of disciplined flying. Back on the ground. At 1220, that's 12:20 p.m., one of the instructors leaned against the wing, sipping coffee and half watching the debrief. He raised his voice just enough to carry across the group. If she can't handle a basic brake turn without hugging the throttle, She's not going to make it past the first week of ops. Few of the cadets laughed. A few more looked away. No one said a word in her defense. Ava stood off to the side, arms crossed. Face un riadable. When the debrief ended, she walked back toward the barracks alone. That night, in her room, she went over the flight recording. Pause. Replay. Pause. Replay. Her movements were crisp. Her angles were clean. She had flown the profile exactly as trained. It wasn't thrilling, but it was safe, efficient, repeatable. In an actual sortie, that would have mattered. But no one saw that. They only saw what she didn't do, what she didn't shout, what she didn't overcorrect at 1915 or 7:15 p.m. The simulator was empty. Ava slid into the left seat, powered up the mock cockpit, and ran through another emergency scenario she wasn't scheduled for. No audience, no flight partner, no validation, just muscle memory, quiet repetition, and hands that didn't tremble under pressure. She didn't fly to be noticed. She flew to be ready, and readiness didn't always look impressive at first glance. At 0610, the morning ramp was still wrapped in fog. The sun just starting to pull color into the sky over Laughlin. Ava moved across the tarmac with quiet purpose, helmet clipped to her flight bag, checklist tucked into the sleeve of her clipboard. She kept pace behind her crew chief, boots steady, steps even. They reached the T6, parked at slot 7. Routine pre-flight. Nothing different. Nothing extraordinary. Battery on. Fuel boost checked. Oxygen confirmed. Flaps neutral. Altimeter set. She moved through the cockpit like she always did. Efficient. Focused. Then came the gloves. She reached into her bag and pulled out the same pair she wore every time. Faded green. Edges frayed at the seams, and soft with age. They didn't match the issued kind. The wrist cuffs had been restitched by hand. One finger patch barely hanging on. An instructor walking the line paused, cocked an eyebrow, and muttered something just loud enough to carry. Thought we were flying jets. Not working. Salvage. Must have picked those up at a garage sale. A few cadets chuckled. Someone mimed, sniffing the air. Ava didn't react. She slipped the gloves on slowly, finger by finger, then went back to checking her radios. The instructor moved on. The jokes faded. She never explained the gloves. Never told anyone they had belonged to her father. He had flown 8 seconds the Warthog, as everyone called it years before. He didn't come back from his final deployment to Afghanistan. The gloves were the only thing shipped home that still held shape, still carried the curve of his grip, still smelled faintly of fuel and grit and heat. Ava didn't need a photo to remember him. She wore his memory every time she touched the stick. At 0622 or 6:22 a.m., her voice came over the comms as clear and calm as ever. Ready for engine start. Slot 7. No kiber. No hesitation. Just the sound of someone who knew what mattered and what didn't. She never flinched when they laughed. Not because she didn't hear it, but because she knew what those gloves had held, and the ones who mocked her couldn't imagine the weight of a grip like that. At 1405, the simulator bay at Laughlin Air Force Base buzzed with low conversation and stale coffee. Ava stepped into the mock cockpit of the T6 Texan II without a word. The synthetic leather of the seat creaked as she strapped in. Overhead lights flickered dim orange, casting a dull glow across the instrument panel. Sim time. Emergency scenarios. Everyone knew the drill, but no one expected what came next. The flight started routine. Taxi. Takeoff. Standard climb out. Then, at 1418 or 2:18 p.m., the HUD flickered once and cut to black. Comms dropped a second later. No warning. No instructor prompt. Just silence. Across the room, the instructor sat back slightly in his chair. Saying nothing, Ava didn't flinch. Her fingers moved fast. Backup steam gauges. Turn coordinator steady. Airspeed alive. She checked her RPM, trimmed the nose, and leveled the wings. No engine thrust, no visuals, no voice guidance. She initiated a dead stick landing, scanning her altimeter and VSI, calculating distance to the nearest simulated runway. She managed her glide slope with practiced control, adjusted flaps to TO mid-descent, and lined up for final without external help. No panits, no flash, just method. She touched down at 1424. Wheels squeaking gently on virtual pavement. Center line perfect. The instructor glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly. He scribbled something in his log and said nothing. Back in the bay, one cadet muttered that the sim probably glitched. Another shrugged, said the software must have defaulted her through the scenario. Someone else laughed and called it simulator luck. Ava unplugged her headset and stepped out of the cockpit. No one looked at her. No one said good job. No one asked how she did it. She walked back toward the lockers alone. What she did wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was clean, professional. The kind of flying that saved lives when things got real. The kind that didn't need noise to be right. But to them, flaps down meant something went easy. And respect, whatever little there might have been, vanished the moment she landed without a story worth retelling. At 1540, the briefing room was mostly quiet. Just a few cadets killing time before the next flight block. Slouched in chairs, half watching the weather radar scroll across the projector screen, Ava sat off to the side. As usual, reviewing the sortie checklist on her iPad. Her gloves were tucked under her elbow, and a half-empty bottle of water balanced on the arm of the chair. A younger cadet leaned over and asked if he could check the updated flight schedule. Ava handed the tablet over without hesitation. He scrolled, tapping through base ops screens, flipping tabs. Then, without meaning to, his thumb brushed the gallery icon. A photo opened. Not a recent one. Not anything from the simulator or the dorms. It was grainy, muted in color. Ava stood in front of an A-10 Warthog. BDUs faded by the sun. Boots covered in desert dust. Just behind her, half obscured, was a subdued patch combat controller team. He didn't say anything, just stared a second too long. Ava stepped over and gently took the tablet back. Her face was calm. No irritation. No smile either. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't invite questions. By 1700, word had already started drifting down the halls. Someone had seen something weird on her screen. Looked like old service photos. Didn't even match her uniform now. One guy said it had to be fake. Another said it didn't matter. But a few didn't laugh. They didn't know what to make of it. Ava still walked the same. Still flew the same. Still kept to herself. But now, there was something unspoken in the air around her. A photo that shouldn't exist. A story no one had been told. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't who they thought she was. At 1440, a sharp tone cracked through the overhead speaker in the flight ops building. Tango Red. Real-world emergency. All training flights were immediately suspended. Cadets scattered from briefing rooms and sim stations. Some still in flight suits. Others halfway through their gear checks. The air shifted quiet at first. Then confusion. On the status screen above the desk, a red blip blinked just east of the training zone boundary. A civilian Cessna 172, low and erratic. No radio contact. Entering restricted airspace. Air traffic control was already calling emergency frequencies, but the aircraft wasn't responding. Instructors clustered near the tower feed. Voix low. Radios active. One was already coordinating with base security. Another ordered several cadets to clear the hallway. A few stood frozen near the comms desk, unsure whether to move or wait. Ava didn't move at all. She stepped forward. She slid on a spare headset from the radio station and reached for the secondary frequency selector. Calm. Intentional. Her thumb flicked the switch to 121.5 megahertzes, the emergency guard frequency used across civilian and military aviation. Without waiting for permission, she keyed the mic. Cessna, in restricted airspace north of Laughlin. This is Laughlin Base operations on guard. You are squawking standby and descending below 3,000 feet. Verify your fuel state and intentions immediately. There was static, then a faint, jittery voice came through. Older male. Slurred. Nervous. Lost visual. Don't know the heading. Something about low fuel. A broken GPS. Ava responded evenly. Adjust heading 230. Begin a shallow climb. Confirm fuel remaining in minutes. Not hours. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look around. She called for the pilot to squawk 7,700. Emergency code. Then asked him to reset his altimeter to 29. 92. Every phrase was clipped, direct, and steady, the exact cadence used in high-stakes air traffic coordination. The instructor closest to her stopped talking mid-sentence. Ava coaxed the pilot toward a stable altitude, directed him out of military airspace with a slow left turn, gave him bearing toward a civilian field 20 miles southeast, repeated his heading 3 times until he locked it in, told him he was doing fine, told him he'd see the runway in 7 minutes if he held that course. No one else spoke, not the instructors, not the cadets. They just watched her work. At 1:45 or 2:54 p.m., the Cessna touched down safely at Eagle Pass Municipal. No incident. No damage. 1 safe landing logged. 1 silent room left behind. Ava set the headset down. No grin. No comment. Just a quiet return to her seat, as if nothing had happened. For the first time, people weren't laughing. They weren't doubting. They weren't speaking at all. They had just watched her do something none of them were ready for. Something that didn't come from a textbook. Something that sounded a lot like experience. At 1730, the air inside the operations building was starting to settle. The emergency was over. The screens had gone dark, and most cadets had drifted into hushed conversations or silent awe. But the tension hadn't fully lifted. Not yet. Then the door opened. A colonel stepped in, still dusty from the field. His uniform marked with the insignia of Air Force Special Operations Command. He was tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of officer who carried command in his walk. No one expected his arrival. A few instructors straightened. 1 cadet moved to greet him. He didn't stop. He scanned the room once. Eyes passed over clipboards, name tapes, rank patches. Then they found her. Ava stood near the rear, her gloves still tucked under one arm, headset slung around her neck. The colonel froze. He took 1 step forward, then another. The room went still, held in place by the sudden shift in weight. That's her. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. He pointed. Slow. Deliberate. That's the one who saved my team in Kandahar. No one moved. Cadets looked at each other, confused. Someone whispered. The colonel turned to an instructor. Face unreadable. She was the JTAC. She was the one on the ground. Called in fire support when we were pinned. She got us out. No questions. No qualifiers. Just fact. Then the colonel did something no one was ready for. He snapped to attention and saluted, not out of politeness, not for formality, but with the discipline of a soldier who knew exactly who stood in front of him. Ava returned the salute. No shift in her posture, no change in her expression, just steady eyes, steady hand. Around them, cadets stood frozen. The ones who had laughed, duded, talked behind her back. They couldn't look her in the eye now. No one had ever seen her like this. And maybe, no one really had until now. From that moment on, everything was different. Word spread slowly, almost reluctantly, like the base itself wasn't ready to accept who she really was. By 1910, instructors were quietly asking around. One mentioned her name at the squadron desk, another made a discreet call. Within an hour, the pieces began to fit. Ava Lewis hadn't just transferred into pilot training late, years before she ever set foot in a T-6 cockpit. She was a combat controller. Air Force Special Operations Command. JTAC qualified. Embedded with teams in Kandahar during a rough spring in 2014, one of those missions went bad fast. 2 fire teams pinned in a dry ravine. Comms were jammed. No air support was tracking the right location. She stayed on the ground for nearly 4 hours. Under direct fire. Relaying coordinates. Stacking air assets. And calling precision strikes so close, the pilots had to double confirm. She was 24. Her father, an A-10 pilot, was on deployment in another province that same week. He didn't come back. She never talked about it. Never mentioned the Bronze Star, or the minor shrapnel wounds, or that some of the aircrew she coordinated with had written letters after the mission, saying they owed her everything. After recovery, Ava requested reassignment, not a command post, not promotion. She applied for pilot training, not because she wanted recognition, but because she knew those skies. Her father died in them. She wanted to serve again, this time from above. She never told the others, didn't wear a patch, didn't ask for credit. Now, cadets passed her in silence, not out of fear, but respect, the kind that doesn't come from medals or speeches. She wasn't trying to be more than a cadet. She just never was one to begin with. By 2110, the base had gone quiet. Lights dimmed in the halls. Doors clicked shut. Outside, the wind shifted low across the pavement, just enough to rattle the edge of the flag near the admin building. Inside the study lounge, Ava sat alone. Same corner chair. Same checklist open in front of her. The overhead light buzzed faintly above her. She was reviewing final approach procedures for the 3rd time, pen resting between her fingers. Footsteps approached. Not fast. Not hesitant. Just there. A soft clink. A cup of black coffee, steaming slightly, was placed beside her binder. The hand didn't linger. No voice followed. No explanation. Just the quiet scrape of boots turning back down the hallway. She looked up. Didn't need to ask. The same cadet who used to mock her, used to call her Clipboard Chick, was already disappearing through the doorway. Shoulders squared. Head low. She didn't call after him. Didn't smile. She just sat there. One hand around the coffee. The other, still on the checklist. Outside, the night deepened. No one laughed anymore. Not about her. Not after today. She never asked to be seen. She showed up early, stayed late, and let her work speak louder than her voice ever tried to. Ava Lewis didn't wear medals on her sleeve or stories on her lips. She carried memory in silence, honor in small gestures, and strength in the calm between storms. Some heroes fly, others guide from the shadows. She did both, and she never needed applause to know her place. Not all heroes wear wings. Some carry weight. The world never notices. Until one quiet day. When they do, and we're reminded what dignity really looks like,